Welcome back to Ashes of Shady Sands. The story continues with Part 2, Dust and Rebirth.
Chapter 1. Ghosts in the Hills. As settlements across the former NCR were left in disarray, not all of its citizens were plunged into chaos and despair. There were some that chose not to hide from the mayhem and terror, but to face it head-on and embrace the uncertainty. In the case of our fellow survivors from Shady Sands, we returned to the newly founded settlement known as New Ashford. And to those who may have dismissed the new settlement as nothing more than weaklings banding together, making them easy prey for raiders, this was not the case. New Ashford was rising, a skeleton town becoming something more, something real people could hold on to. The survivors planted crops where bombs once fell. Guard towers made from scavenged metal rose at the perimeter. Cole Harlan walked the ridgelines like a restless spirit, always watching, always waiting. And then, the silence broke. A wounded caravan guard came running, screaming towards him.
Please, help me!
The caravan guard flailed his arms like a madman, looking more like an insane person that has just escaped from custody.
The survivor was brought into the town where they were interrogated and thoroughly had their story examined by the officials. The account from the survivor claimed that a new threat had arisen in the wasteland, and no one could ever be safe again. While the account could be dismissed as paranoia, since the wasteland was already a constant danger, the following days would lead to a series of events that cause a panic to set in the town. First, a supply caravan vanished en route from Dayglow. Then, another caravan was struck the day after, and then the next. The patrols found nothing but blood and something worse. Bones stripped clean, armor missing, dog tags scattered like warnings.
They left messages etched in NCR steel. The vultures feed. With more clear evidence every day, it became clear to Bragg and his company as to where this new band of raiders or attackers were coming from. But that's the most important thing about this situation. These weren't raiders. They were NCR deserters, cannibals, ghosts of the Republic turned against it during its greatest hour of need. And they were hunting down the settlers and survivors of New Ashford. While this meant there was a present danger to the community of New Ashford, this was nothing compared to what came next. Chapter 2. Fire from the Sky. Bragg led a recovery detail into the cliffs south of the old highway. With him, Sandoval and a scavenger technician named Mercy DeWitt, young, fast-talking, smarter than her age. They found the wreckage of a caravan convoy, melted and seared beyond recognition. A message burned into a chunk of ceramic armor. Mercy read the message aloud.
The fire cleanses? Wait, is this who I think it is?
Bragg nodded grimly and silently in reply. They both did not hesitate and made their way back to New Ashford with a warning. New Ashford was in serious danger.
The firebrands had returned, and they had their sights set on New Ashford, a rogue sect of the Brotherhood of Steel, once scribes, now zealots. They worshipped atomic fire, calling it holy and divine justice against those who used technology that were not members of the Brotherhood of Steel. Their leader was a man named Brother Matthias, a man who once archived knowledge and now preached flame.
Cole recognized the signs.
They're not raiding. They're purging.
He called the council. New Ashford would burn, unless they struck first, and time was not on their side.
Chapter 3. Siege at New Ashford. It came at midnight. The firebrands descended from the ridgelines like swarms of ants, chanting, their plasma weapons glowing, their bodies wrapped in scorched robes. Mercy rerouted solar arrays to power the automated defenses. Sandoval converted the medical tent into a trauma bunker. Bragg manned the north barricade with the old fire axe. It still bore scorch marks from Shady Sands.
Cole never shouted. He pointed. He moved. He fought. When Brother Matthias breached the gate, he came with a prayer and a plasma caster. He believed that this would be his greatest triumph over the NCR remnants. However, he came across Cole. Cole met him with silence and a bullet. The former soldier showed the zealot the price to be paid for trespassing against his home. The prophet's body burned with his faith. The other warriors were not prepared for this kind of resistance, so they fled the battle, and the siege ended.
Chapter 4: The Embers of Tomorrow. The morning after the siege, the air still smelled like plasma and ash, but New Ashford stood. Cole ordered the bodies burned, not as an insult, but as a warning.
The council reconvened. Mercy, Sandoval, Cole, and now, Nina. She was only 13, but she'd carried ammo, sewn bandages, and stood in the line of fire without flinching. She spoke calmly. If the Republic is gone, we need something new. Something smaller. Smarter. They called it the Phoenix Council, and that's what they became. Not the NCR, not the Brotherhood, but something that remembered what came before and vowed to never forget it again. The small crowd of people, survivors, settlers, traders, and former soldiers would become the soul of this new settlement. The journey from Shady Sands to the founding of New Ashford had shaped this community, but their story is far from over.
Part 3: The Bear Divided. Chapter 1: Fracture Lines Form. With Shady Sands gone, the Republic fractured, not at the borders, but at its core. Power vacuums do not last long in the wasteland, and like any predator that looks for opportunity to strike at its prey, there are those who would take advantage of the situation with no regard for those that stand in their way. In the South, Senator Vance Holbrook declared a continuity of governance under emergency rule. His flag still bore the bear, but this bear's claws were sharper as there was no political opponent to oppose his emergency decree. Holbrook was giddy at the thought that he could have his political career and legacy soar to the next level and be remembered as the man who saved the NCR in its greatest hour of need. But he would not get to savor the moment for too long.
In the north, General Althea Krieg, a battle-hardened general that served in the conquest of the Rapids and pacification of the Divide, fortified Navarro and declared martial authority, using scavenged old enclave tech to hold the frontier together. Reservists and volunteers were rushed to meet the general in hopes of receiving special treatment for loyalty to her cause. In her mind, Althea Krieg believed that only the NCR military was capable of restoring true order across the NCR following the death of the nation's government and destruction of its political, cultural, and national capital city. However, for all her good intentions, General Krieg cared only for results and saw the coming conflict as a bloody, brutal, but necessary fight that only she could help the NCR weather through on the road to recovery.
And from the west came a deadly silence. That would see the California bear grow a third angry head. An ambitious man, Governor Ellis Muir, quietly calculated his next moves as he weighed his options to see which faction he should lend his support to. In reality, Muir didn't support either General Krieg or Senator Holbrook. As far as he was concerned, they were both obstacles that stood in his way to take advantage of the current situation. The wasteland may have come to the conclusion that the NCR bear was dead. However, the bear wasn't dead. It was now three-headed and turning on itself.
Chapter 2: The Confederacy is Revealed. Muir emerged on the scene wrapped in populist fire. His broadcasts echoed across the wastes.
The Republic betrayed you. I never will. Join me and let us remind the wasteland that our people will not be scared by would-be tyrants, nor cowardly attacks by our enemies, I promise you. We will rise stronger from this, and we will avenge Shady Sands.
His promise for a Western Confederation gained momentum. Towns that lost loved ones to the blast turned on NCR loyalists. Former Rangers switched sides. It seemed that the battle lines were already being drawn, and not a single attempt was made to bring peace or stability to regions reeling from the chaos. Each faction was convinced that they were the only answer to these terrible circumstances. General Krieg demanded submission and surrender. Senator Holbrook denounced insubordination and threatened citizens with execution for possible betrayal. Muir offered security and food and vengeance. The Confederate forces under Muir stormed the old Bakersfield installations and seized their comms. Within weeks, half the western settlements declared for him. Holbrook responded with sanctions, Krieg with threats. Neither worked. General Krieg only fortified her position, swelling up her army before preparing to march south and crush both Governor Muir and Senator Holbrook. And in between all this mayhem was the settlement we have come to know as New Ashford. And of course, in New Ashford, the Phoenix Council watched and prepared. Chapter 3: The Knife's Edge. The Phoenix Council had observed and noticed how the events unfolded in the weeks and months that followed after the destruction of Shady Sands. Though they were not interested in a power grab for themselves, they would resist any attempts to be pulled into this conflict on one side or the other. Their strength would soon be tested, as a messenger had just arrived to New Ashford, bearing an important message. An NCR loyalist envoy from Senator Holbrook arrived at New Ashford asking for troops. That same night, a Confederacy agent offered coal, land, supplies, and a seat at Muir's high table. Both men saw New Ashford as a potential hub to supply their own forces and fortified position to repel any enemy advances. The night was long as no one in New Ashford could sleep, and everyone was gathered to discuss what course of action should be taken. The council debated for hours. Mercy DeWitt warned of infiltration.
How can we be certain that everyone here is on the same side? We've seen how quickly Muir has gathered support for his cause, and his promises are surely to win people over if they're desperate or angry enough.
Sandoval begged for neutrality.
We have worked too hard to build what little we have. We only just recently survived our siege from the Brotherhood, and we won't make it if we spend all our resources helping one side, only to get crushed by the other. We need to stay out of it, plain and simple.
And of course, Bragg wanted to strike first.
The way I see it, we need to send a message. New Ashford is not a tool for greedy or dangerous men to use against the well-being of other people. There are many who are suffering, who have not been as fortunate as us in rebuilding, and do not have a choice in the matter. But we do have a choice, and our first choice should be to strike first and weaken Muir and Holbrook before General Krieg starts marching south with her army of minions.
There was only chaos and indecision until a familiar voice spoke up amongst the crowd of angry and frightened adults. Nina, now 14, stood at the firelight and said,
"We don't choose sides. We make them. That's who we are when we founded New Ashford. We came together as a community to rebuild, and we can come together again to defend our home just as we did before. This is no different."
The tension was heavy, but each member from New Ashford knew what was at stake if they chose to side with one faction or the other. The vote was close, but the Phoenix would remain neutral and abstain from participating in any battles, for now. That night, someone shouted and warned that one of the envoys tried to poison the water supply. The information of an attack on New Ashford began to spread faster than it could be contained, though both envoys were apprehended and interrogated, and the water supply checked for tampering, only to discover that it was perfectly fine. The damage had already been done. Though it remains unclear as to who set this rumor loose, there was no going back. Muir and Holbrook would accuse one another for violating each other's attempts at establishing peaceful communications between their groups and the residents of New Ashford. And so the war would now escalate even further from beyond this point. What was once an uneasy truce between Muir's Confederacy and Holbrook's Loyalists, now it laid fractured and ruined. The civil war across the new California Republic was well underway, with three distinct factions that had no interest in peace, but only absolute victory. The first Civil War shots weren't fired, they were whispered, and those whispers fanned the flames of war across the new California Republic's former territories.
Chapter 4: The Bears' Heads Attack. General Krieg launched a push south from Navarro, triggering the Battle of Lone Mesa. NCR loyalists and Confederacy partisans clashed in red dust and smoke. The Civil War was anything but organized. It wasn't war. It was vengeance, resentment, and mistrust that came from the very people who stood shoulder to shoulder to fight and defend one another from the Enclave, the Brotherhood, or anyone else that would have threatened the NCR before the loss of Shady Sands. Entire towns vanished. Entire histories erased. Families ripped apart, figuratively and literally. In the chaos, the Phoenix Council had to act. They dispatched medics, engineers, and supply runners. They weren't picking a side. They were helping everyone by being neutral everywhere. And everywhere they went, they earned trust, not with guns, but with clean water, with steady hands, and with Nina's quiet voice, broadcasting the same message nightly to all who were listening.
We remember, we rebuild. We are many, and we are one. Together, we will rise, and together, we will heal.
Chapter 5: Ashes of Allegiance. Ellis Muir made his final move. The Battle of Lone Mesa had shown that General Krieg would need more than just brute strength to push her way into the Western Confederacy's held positions. His agents attempted to assassinate General Krieg and frame Holbrook. The plan was simple: disorient Krieg's forces by killing her, and turn his attention towards Holbrook and finish him off before the North could muster its strength again for a second push. The attempt on the life of General Krieg had almost succeeded, but it failed. But not without cost. Krieg's retaliation leveled 3 Confederate towns. Families watched as their loved ones were taken into custody by Krieg's forces and hanged to be displayed for all to see. Krieg had made her point. Muir did not flinch. Holbrook would not back down. The Republic was on the edge of full collapse.
But then, as if through divine intervention, came the unexpected. A stranger had arrived at New Ashford. This stranger was not known yet by Muir nor Holbrook, but they would soon learn and know who she was. Her name was Lee Moldaver, an NCR ranger, a survivor, also from Shady Sands, and an ancient ghost of the old world. She carried a battered NCR flag, stitched with new stars, and she had a plan to end this conflict and end it soon.